Hello, welcome to Tuesday in Parliament. Our look at the best of the day in the Commons and the Lords. On this programme, Labour accuses the government of paying for tax cuts by reducing benefits.
What this government is all about is forcing government departments to meet the Chancellor's spending targets so we can pay for further tax giveaways.
Threatened industrial action by prison officers in England and Wales is condemned by a Justice Minister.
We are clear that action of this nature by the POA poses a risk to the safety of prisons and prison staff.
And a car chief lists his Brexit requests.
We remain in a free trade agreement, we've got access to the customs union, technology is harmonised across Europe, so stay as we are is the ideal solution for Nissan.
But first, Labour has described as brutal a government decision to restrict disability benefits. In the Commons, the Shadow Chancellor, John McDonnell, claimed ministers were cutting spending to fund tax giveaways. The government wants to reverse the effects of court rulings, which have increased the number of people who can claim the higher rate of disability benefit, now called Personal Independence Payments, or PIPs. The government said the rulings would add nearly £4 billion to the benefits bill. At Treasury Questions, Mr McDonnell described the kind of people the government now wanted to exclude from PIPs payments.
This was brutal. Last year, when the government was forced to halt cuts to PIP payments to disabled people, the previous Chancellor absorbed the costs. In this case, are these disabled people being denied benefits because the Chancellor's refused to absorb these costs of the upper tribunal decision?
Well, Mr. Speaker, what we're doing here is restoring Parliament's original intention around these payments, ensuring that they go to the people that they were intended to go to, and making sure that the benefits cap that's in place, part of our fiscal rules, is able to be met.
One of those people contacted us. She has type 2 diabetes, fibromyalgia, depression and anxiety, and as a result of the action taken by the government, will not now be extended the support the courts have awarded her. It's clear, isn't it, that after last night's announcement of further austerity measures by individual departments, what this government is all about is forcing government departments to meet the Chancellor's spending targets so we can pay for further tax giveaways to the wealthy.
The honourable gentleman, I'm afraid, will have to wait until next week to find out what my proposals are. But let me be clear, we have said we have no plans for further welfare reforms in this Parliament.
Later, the Work and Pensions Secretary faced more questions from Labour about the latest benefit changes.
Will the Minister confirm, as stated in the impact assessment published with the regulation, that people suffering from schizophrenia, learning disability, autism and dementia will be among the worst affected by these cuts? And, Mr. Speaker, the cut is being achieved by taking benefit away from people whose mobility impairments are the result of psychological distress. They will no longer be entitled to benefit, according to the wording of the regulation. Doesn't that directly contradict the Prime Minister's commitment to treat mental health on a par with physical health?
I want to be clear what this is not. This is not a policy change, nor is it intended to make new savings. I'd like to reiterate my commitment that there will be no further welfare savings beyond those already legislated for. This will not result in any claimant seeing a reduction in the amount of PIP previously awarded by the DWP. Mental health conditions and physical disabilities which lead to higher costs will continue to be supported, as has always been the case.
But if everything is working so well, why are my advice surgeries full of people who are waiting for their PIP assessments for a very long time, who are being denied them when they've been long-term disabled, who are being caused massive amounts of distress by the process, and who feel utter despair at having to have anything to do with it?
It's clear that different medical conditions will have different impacts on people's living and mobility. Does my right honourable friend agree that we must recognise this simple fact if we are to continue to target resources on those who are most vulnerable and most in need?
A constituent, Catherine, contacted me very concerned about how the amendments will impact on her when she is transferred from DLA to PIP. She currently receives low-rate mobility and suffers from ADHD, depression, generalised anxiety and social phobia. Her life is severely affected by her mental health. She cannot plan the route of a journey and she cannot follow the route of a familiar journey. Why does the government want to deny Catherine the mobility component of PIP?
Well, she is not having any of the any changes to the rules that have been that she's been applying under in the past. And I should gently point out to the honourable gentleman, these are rules that were passed by a government of which he was a member.
I have some constituents who are unable to leave their homes without assistance due to physical disability, and others who are unable to leave their homes because of a mental disability. Why should one be entitled to receive support via PIP and not the other?
Well, they both will be entitled to PIP at the level as it will be assessed. The only difference clearly each individual is different and has different levels of difficulty. It is often the case that visual or cognitive impairments, people who are blind, are not going to have a fluctuating condition, which is clearly less amenable to treatment than some other conditions. So it's the level of the difficulty in someone's daily life, whether they've got a physical or mental health problem, that matters in terms of the PIP assessment.
Damien Green. Well, earlier at Treasury Questions, MPs took the opportunity to appeal for help in the budget next week to deal with the acute funding problems facing social care in England. One Conservative suggested that use be made of national insurance to help pay for the care of elderly and vulnerable people.
Can I ask the Minister, with a view to long-term sustainable financing in health and social care, to look into this as a means of depoliticising the debate and ensuring long-term funding, not just today, but for decades to come for health and social care?
We are mindful of the long-term challenges. If you look at the issues recently highlighted by the Office for Budget Responsibility in their latest fiscal sustainability report, they are laid out quite starkly. And in terms of depoliticising, I would say that backing the NHS's own plan for its own future in the way that we've done is the best way of doing that.
Back in 2010, to meet the rising costs of social care, I proposed a compulsory care levy on all estates. From memory, the Conservatives produced an election poster with gravestones on it and called it a death tax. Yep. I read in today's Times that ministers are now considering exactly the same proposal. Can this possibly be true?
No.
Sir Hugo Swire. Mr. Speaker, but there is an emerging consensus that we do need to better integrate our social care and health system. Given the fact we have already the Better Care Fund and the Chancellor's prudent management of our economies, if he does have any wriggle room in the forthcoming budget, can I ask him if we cannot have some transitional relief for social care until we can work out the best model?
Well, Mr. Speaker, the government has been very clear on a number of occasions that we recognise that the pressures in the system, additional money has been made available through the social care precept.
How can it be right that those local authorities that are under the most pressure in terms of social care can actually raise the least amount through the council tax precept that this government's policy around social care has introduced?
The Better Care Fund, which we've already referred to, actually adjusts for that. And, you know, there are a range of ways in which we're responding to these pressures, which we acknowledge in the social care system.
Jane Ellison. The human rights record of North Korea has been condemned in the House of Lords. The government was asked if it had plans to call in the North Korean ambassador following the killing of Kim Jong-nam, the half-brother of the country's leader. The 45-year-old was at an airport when he was smeared with the nerve agent VX. 2 women have been arrested. They say they were told it was a television prank. A Foreign Office minister said the ambassador had been spoken to recently.
On 14th of February, we summoned the ambassador of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea in response to its ballistic missile test on 11th February. We made clear that such actions were in violation of UN Security Council resolutions, a threat to international security, and that such destabilising activity must stop. We continue to be deeply concerned by their actions, including reports that they are responsible for the killing of Kim Jong-nam.
My Lords, doesn't the horrific use of VX, a toxic nerve agent, to assassinate Kim Jong-nam serve to remind us of North Korea's total disregard for international law, whether through the use of banned chemical weapons, of which it has some 5,000 tons, its nuclear and missile tests, or the execution and incarceration of hundreds of thousands of its own citizens?
Lord Alton asked whether the UK government supported referral to the International Criminal Court or a tribunal.
With regard to the alleged use of VX, Malaysia has gathered its own information. We have no reason to not to believe their conclusions that it is VX, a highly toxic nerve agent, nor that it is DPRK that is responsible. They have the capacity to produce it. But, my Lords, until there is an international awareness of that information from Malaysia, we can't take an action to, internationally to condemn what has happened and to provide that evidential link between DPRK and the murder of Kim Jong-nam.
My Lords, China is the key player in relation to North Korea, and their action appears to complete the isolation of that country. How does the government interpret their sanctions? Is this temporary, or can we expect a sea change in China policy? They've
made sure that throughout the whole of this year they will now be compliant. My Lords, we welcome that public declaration, and we look forward to receiving further details about how they do observe that. It was an important step forward.
The imposition of sanctions is all the more significant having regard to the previous ambivalence of the Chinese government towards North Korea. Should not these sanctions be warmly welcomed, not only here but in the White House, so that whatever the differences, China and the United States can make common cause in the containment of North Korea?
The noble Lord is absolutely right, and as the new Trump administration has taken office, I think it's important that they and China find accord on this matter.
Has my noble friend any information about the number of Christians who are now incarcerated for the sake of their religion in North Korea, which is one of the countries where they are most harassed and oppressed?
Those who practice religion outside very closely state-controlled faiths find themselves subject to appalling persecution. It's a matter that we raise frequently with the North Korean government through our embassy in Pyongyang and also through United Nations and at the Human Rights Council. But, my Lords, it is a continuing, appalling, flagrant breach of international norms.
The Foreign Office Minister, Lady Ainley. You're watching our roundup of the day in the Commons and the Lords. Still to come, the Westminster Pancake Race marks another Shrove Tuesday. The government has won a High Court injunction stopping industrial action by prison staff in England and Wales from going ahead. Members of the Prison Officers Association were planning to withdraw from voluntary duties in a long-running dispute over pay and pensions. The action follows the rejection by the association members of a new pay and conditions package. A Justice Minister was called to answer an urgent question in the House of Commons.
I am grateful for the chance to update the House on this important issue. Strike action is unlawful, and we have said so to the Prison Officers Association. It will seriously disrupt normal operations in prisons, and whilst we will of course take any actions that we can to mitigate the risks, we are clear that action of this nature by the POA poses a risk to the safety of prisons and prison staff. The duties that the Prison Officers Association refer to in their bulletin are not voluntary duty. These are duties that are a fundamental part of a prison officer's role and essential to running a safe and decent prison.
Mr. Speaker, this situation could have easily been avoided. Ministers could have spoken to the POA before imposing a pay policy which has proven to be so divisive and so unpopular. Ministers need to sit down and talk with the POA rather than threaten legal action and claim the action is unlawful before any court has made any such determination. To turn around this mess, Mr. Speaker, we need a Justice Secretary who is serious about working with prison officers, and we need a prisons bill which will deliver serious reform. Sadly, at the moment, we have neither.
Can I congratulate my honourable friend for the excellent work he's doing with a difficult pack of cards? Would he agree with me that a prison officer joins to serve? That means you serve in whatever guise without striking.
I certainly agree with my honourable friend, and in fact the legislation was introduced by the last Labour government, which is why I'm surprised that the Shadow Minister would not condemn this unlawful strike action.
I've listened to the Minister carefully, and earlier he said he thought that this action was designed to disrupt safe and decent running of prisons. Does the Minister understand that the whole reason why prison officers are withdrawing from these tasks is because we do not have safe and decent prisons? We have intolerable and dangerous prisons, prisons that I wouldn't want to work in, and I'm sure that the Minister wouldn't either.
How the fight against organised crime will be tackled once Britain has left the EU has been looked at by the Commons Brexit Committee. David Armand of the National Crime Agency spoke about the importance of cross-border police cooperation.
Being members of Schengen and having access to the Schengen information system, that's linked to the police national computer, so a policeman on the streets in Birmingham can stop a car, do a check on it, find it stolen in France and that the occupants are wanted for serious offences. Now that in itself is an amazing additional protection for the UK. And the access that we've obtained through Europol and the influence that we exert through having a British director who's implemented since 2008 a whole load of systems that are really British intelligence management systems, we would have quite a steep hill to climb if we were to lose access to all of them.
If you look at the EU agencies, for example, Europol, then there are a number of countries with operational agreements with Europol, which I'm sure is the least we would want. US, Australia, Canada, I think Colombia, Norway and Switzerland, well, those took between 5 and 12 years to negotiate. On the other hand, if you look...
5 to 12 years?
Yes, I believe that's right. On the other hand, if you look at Eurojust, which is the prosecutorial coordination body, I believe the US were admitted to some sort of status within Eurojust within about a year of 9/11.
There'll be some great difficulty from the point of view of data protection. I think that is going to be the single biggest difficulty. The challenge is not so much convincing the EU institutions to go along with it, because I think it's quite right to say that the ministers and the authorities are quite happy to continue with the UK. Cooperation with the UK, but I think the problem is the activists who are going to go to court and bring these legal challenges, and they can't easily be negotiated away because they're based on the EU Charter of Rights. Of course, as a primary law of the European Union, it can't easily be negotiated away. They're not going to agree an amendment to the Charter for the sake of a departing member state. So that really is the biggest problem by far, I think, in this area.
Meanwhile, the car maker Nissan has repeated its request for there to be as little change as possible when Britain leaves the EU. Nissan's senior vice president, Colin Lather, told the International Trade Committee that his company wanted the UK to remain in the customs union.
You know, we made our position very clear that before the Brexit vote, that Nissan's position was, from a business point of view, from a surety point of view, from a stability going forward, remaining in the customs union was definitely the best.
And were you given any promise about the customs union?
No. So Nissan's point before the vote was clearly it is better for us to stay in. However, even though we explained that to all of our staff, we didn't take a political view. So we said to our staff, look, you guys, you have to vote for yourselves and for your family. So we didn't take a view.
So you're quite comfortable out with the customs union?
No, our position is the same as it was before the vote. It would be better to stay in a status quo so that we've got surety of business going forward. So that would be the best outcome for us at the end of the Brexit process, that we remain in a free trade agreement, we've got access to the customs union, technology is harmonised across Europe. So stay as we are is the ideal solution for Nissan. We made a decision that it was better to replace Qashqai in the UK and bring a car from Japan and produce it in the UK. So we have a base business situation which is based on a set of circumstances. As those circumstances change, And we won't wait until the end of the process. We will continually review the decisions that we take based on anything that materially changes. So at the moment, we've got a set of circumstances that we're quite happy with, and we've made our decision, and we'll honour that decision and go forward. But if anything materially changes, then we'd review constantly.
Now, motorists could be facing sizable increases in their insurance premiums following changes brought in by the government to personal injury compensation payments. Young drivers have been warned that their annual car premiums could rise by as much as £1,000 a year. Drivers aged over 65 could be facing an extra £300 a year. The compensation changes and the effect of them were raised at a session of the Transport Committee.
Yesterday, the Justice Secretary announced a reduction in insurers' discount rates on compensation from 2.5% to minus 0.7%. It's been reported that's going to have a very negative impact on young drivers. Can you tell us what that impact will be and what they can expect to pay in the future?
Yeah, so that change is affecting the cost of paying out a large claim. And if you build a model of large claims cost, the single biggest factor that's driving a higher large claim compared to other drivers is age. And it's been widely reported by PwC that young drivers 18 to 22 would expect a £1,000 increase in their premium just from a single stroke of the Lord Chancellor's pen.
£1,000. So for the people paying £4,000, you're saying that could go up to £5,000?
So that was the estimate made by PwC. So yes.
I mean, do you think that's acceptable? Isn't this going beyond the bounds of reasonableness?
To take that,
yes, please do.
The Lord Chancellor's decision yesterday is absolute madness. As you have rightly pointed out, it will add a significant cost to the cost of the young drivers' car insurance premiums. As Simon's articulated, the PwC estimate was around £1,000. It's really important that this group of MPs, and I would urge you to grasp this issue and make it very clear to the Lord Chancellor the significant impact that this is going to have on young drivers. And you've got a petition of 180,000 people who indicated their concern at the cost of car insurance. I think all of the market estimates that have been put out over the last 24 hours would indicate that the Lord Chancellor's decision yesterday is going to make car insurance for young drivers skyrocket.
Now, we could possibly describe them as something of a Westminster dynasty. A member of the latest generation of the Hogg family, Charlotte Hogg, has just been appointed a Bank of England Deputy Governor. Her father was the former Agriculture Minister Douglas Hogg, now Lord Hailsham. Her mother, Sarah Hogg, was a Downing Street advisor to John Major. And her grandfather, the previous Lord Hailsham, was Lord Chancellor. At the Commons Treasury Committee, Charlotte Hogg, who's an economist, was asked about her suitability to serve on the Bank of England's Monetary Policy Committee, or MPC.
Have you ever had a job which requires you to think through how the MPC is arriving at its decisions?
Well, when you make, both in the credit card business and in the retail banking business, you're constantly making pricing decisions. You know, what price should we set on mortgages? What price should we set on credit cards? What's the right rate for our savings products? And all of those factor in a range of things, including what the interest rate is going to be and how we're going to fund ourselves as a bank as well.
The reason I ask that question is that the majority of people who gravitate to the MPC job are people who have done that and who have been thinking as professionally for a long time about the factors that go to make those decisions. You haven't got that experience.
I don't, and I think it's a plus, because the MPC is made up, as we know, of 9 people, all with independent votes. And everything one learns about decision making is you want a difference of views and a difference of experience coming into those decisions.
So we can look to you to break down groupthink.
I think groupthink is not alive and well at the bank anyway, but I think it certainly helps to have a different set of cognitive experiences and a different set of careers serving the same objective and the same mission.
Charlotte Hogg. Finally, it's been Shrove Tuesday, and yes, the annual Pancake Race alongside the Palace of Westminster has been taking place. This year it was a keenly fought contest between MPs, peers and the Westminster press.
3, 2, 1, go!
The race was a relay, around 10 laps of part of Victoria Tower Gardens. And it was all in aid of the disability charity Rehab. And the winner was, I hope I get it right, a decisive win for the MPs. Naturally enough, there were scenes of wild delight at the finishing post. And no, I'm not going to say that's the end of this flipping programme. But do join me again for our next Daily Roundup. Until then, from me, Keith McDougall, goodbye.